A policy into action. Arizona and Texas National Guard troops start deploying to the border.
Texas vowed to send 250 National Guard troops by Monday. Arizona says they'll send 150 by next week.
What happened during that infamous tarmac meeting between former President Bill Clinton and former Attorney General Loretta Lynch?
On Monday, Loretta Lynch will be giving an interview talking about this very subject.
Her version of events.
I think everyone, in hindsight, wish it hadn't happened, starting with Loretta Lynch, starting with Bill Clinton. I think it was chit-chat.
President Trump taking on two foes, China and Russia, with tough talk and tough policy.
I'm not saying there won't be a little pain, but we're going to have a much stronger country when we're finished.
Trump's a negotiator. You know, talk hard, then maybe concede a bit. He's much cleverer than anyone gives him credit for.
Do you want to keep your personal information private on Facebook? Well, then you're going to have to pay to do that.
Did you have an opt-out button? Please don't use my profile data for advertising.
We don't have an opt-out at the highest level. That would be a paid product.
I bet my life on Henry Victory in the putt-putt today.
You bet your life?
Masters weekend.
It's a big one.
That's a big one.
It's a lot.
You don't think a lot of your life, Ed.
Well,
That's what it comes down
no,
to.
it's more that I don't have a lot of faith in peace skills.
No,
on the
he's
show.
not seen my putt-putt skills. Listen, I've had some troubles in contests on the program of late.
Troubles?
But it's the beginning. Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years. It's going to start today on the plaza with a putt-putt. I mean, Abby's already weighed in. She wants me to win. America's weighing in.
Because he's so tired of winning. I can't listen to
I'm
it
tired
anymore.
of
It's
winning at this
driving me
point.
nuts.
I mean, if you want to win today, I don't know.
Oh, really? So
I mean, the three-pointer.
Oh, you're giving it away.
The excuse already starts.
See if I lose, I can
We're going to get there.
and try that.
I do
Because
want
the
to know.
Masters is on right now, so we're doing a little putt-putt.
We're
That's why I
doing
got
our own.
green on.
But I watched you two throughout maternity leave. What happened? Like, you used to win a lot.
Oh!
I am curious.
I don't know. I mean, sometimes you trip up a little bit. I'm tired so much of winning in the Trump sense that I don't have any energy left to win in a personal
Well,
sense.
speaking of the
that.
Trump winning and the president trying to get on top of these big issues, he talked about it this week, sending troops to the border. Now he's actually acting.
That's right. So yesterday, President Mattis, no, Secretary of Defense Mattis signed a deployment order, and we're seeing the first National Guard troops deployed to the border. Texas has committed 250 out the gates, Arizona 100, many other states saying we are prepared and postured to send more. But that official order triggers a process by which up to 4,000 troops will be headed to that border for a deployment. Right now it's a 6-month order. It's a Title 32 order, which is gobbledygook speak for the fact that governors will still have direct control over them, but these troops are federalized in that they're paid by the federal government on a federal mission to basically stop the infiltration of illegals into our southern border, because we continue to see a problem there, and Congress has not responded with the border wall the president had hoped for.
Yeah, well, as they should. Governors they see exactly what goes on in their particular state, and every state is different, so it's so important that the president does work directly with those governors. So the president is asking for 2,000 to 4,000 at the end of this. By the end of this week, I guess it would be up to 400. But this all stems from this article that was talked about last week, where you have these migrants coming over, many of them from Honduras, and people didn't have a clear sense as to what the laws were in this country when it came to immigration, that you could, once you take one step over that border and you say you need a safe place to go, it could be a couple of years before the court figures it out.
After that, talking about maybe we need to send National Guard troops to the border. You had some on the left freaking out and saying, what is he talking about, the military? And then we pointed out, well, in 2010, Barack Obama did something similar because he felt like there was a crisis. Well, overnight, literally in the last few moments, we've gotten these pictures from late yesterday where the Pentagon is now stepping it up and having their first real briefings on this. You could see top civilian and military officials there sort of mapping out what's going to come in the days ahead.
That's right. You're going to have to map out a rotation, which states are going to be a part of it. We've already seen, Ed, as well, some questions from certain governors saying we don't want to participate. Right. So Oregon, Montana, I believe Nevada, California's in question. What will Jerry Brown do there? You don't want to see a scenario where these governors feel like their contribution, their most recent contribution to the resistance,
Right.
is not being a part of an effort to secure our border. So hopefully they'll come around and
But
not
how
make
much
it a
of
political
that,
issue.
how much of that, to your point, is simply political? Because as you mentioned, this has been done before. The reaction, a lot of people are in hysterics over what's going on, but this happened most recently under former
Right.
President Barack Obama.
He had
and
a couple thousand National Guard
and
troops.
same with
2010.
G.W. Bush back
Right.
in 2006.
And he had more. I believe it was in the range of 6,000 to
6,000.
6,500. And so that will be a question for this president in the days ahead. Is 4,000 enough? Maybe it's because he's going to be struggling to get some governors to participate, as you mentioned, Pete. But the fact of the matter is, George W. Bush did something similar in 2006 with more National Guard troops. And here we are a dozen years later, that border's still not secure. So it may need, maybe 4,000 is a down payment.
Sure.
But in the end, you may need a whole lot more.
But he's
National
saying
Guard
we need to begin somewhere. We need to start implementing some laws that make real sense for the American people so that there is a proper way for people to become citizens of this country. So that's going on. National troops are being sent to the border, but also some policy changes are happening, major moves on immigration. The president signing a memo ordering the end to catch and release policies, and Attorney General Jeff Sessions also ordering zero tolerance policy at the border. These are some pretty big moves that will
Catch
have
and
quite an
release
impact.
is so important to talk about, because basically you catch someone at the border who's basically
action.
illegal. It's a
Arizona and
migrant trying to come over, but they're trying to enter the country illegally. You catch them, they step a foot on the U.S. side of the border, you have to release them. And then they're going to eventually go to court, allegedly, in the weeks, months ahead. Sometimes this takes a year or two, and they never show up for court. So they're in this country illegally.
Yeah, as their case plays out, they're wherever they are. We have no sense of where, and then they have to voluntarily come back for their court appearance, which a lot of them don't do. So this memorandum starts a process that orders the DHS to submit a report to the president within 45 days, and they're doing an assessment of the facilities that they might have near the border, military and civilian, as well as people. Because if you're going to, instead of releasing people after when they're caught, there's a review of why they came. Are you seeking asylum? Sure. Are you here to work? What do you do? Do you have papers or not? And if they don't pass muster, then there's a court hearing that comes later on. But if you're going to hold them for that time process,
how long?
you've got to have the facilities to do it. So the logistics comes into play here. Cost comes into play here. Of course, we understand the cost of illegal immigration as well. So a lot to be fleshed out, but the announcement itself shows there's a new sheriff in town, and catch and release is not going to be.
It's so interesting to hear from people that work on the border, getting their perspective, because what they see coming in every day, and the rules of the road as they existed up to this point, of the flexibility of what they can do when people come through and say they need a place to go, I feel like there's a disconnect between what they're doing and what the American people ultimately understand
And the
know.
president is saying,
Yes, the
with
perception versus the reality.
without Congress acting, the president is saying basically, I'm going to do as much as I can through executive action, basically here with the National Guard, working with governors, not unilaterally, but working with the governors, number one. And number two, remember, the week started as well with the Attorney General Jeff Sessions saying that there's going to be a new quota for immigration judges to up their caseload in terms of deportations. Stop, having it at one level. Let's speed this up, because they're trying to get a handle of the illegal.
You wonder how this changes, or if this changes the immigration debate as far as DACA and the wall going forward. Does strengthen the president's hand to get a deal? Does it not? Is it a reflection that the deal's never going to happen, so I'm going to take my own action?
It's a good question. Yeah, we'll see where that goes. Someplace the president will not be in the next few weeks is the White House Correspondents' Dinner. You remember we were all talking about this last year, because that was the first time during his presidency. Will he go? Will he not go? Ultimately, he decided not to go, and instead he held a big rally. Well, this year he's now said again, I am not going to be there. This is an event that happens once a year. You were over this, so you
I was
understand
president
it well.
of it a few years ago. President Obama did a good job that night, sort of poking fun at himself, poking fun at the media. This president obviously is probably fed up with. It's not poking fun. It's on a sort of a daily basis. Most of the people in that room are kind of slamming him, slashing him, and maybe he's tired of it. He, by the way, gets to slam and slash a lot of his own on his Twitter feed, calling it out as fake news. And so neither side really wants to budge here.
And some people say he doesn't even need it. That when he's on the campaign trail, where he is holding these rallies, he pokes a lot of fun of himself. He makes fun of the press. I mean, it is a show. It is an entertainment when you watch it a lot of the time.
It's the swampiest of the swamp dwellers. Ed, I love you, and forgive me, but it's what it is. And it's a sycophant event where they tell each other how wonderful they are, and then they talk all year long. They talk about how much they hate the president. president, or at least their reporting reflects it. And then they beg. They're like, please, Mr. President, come to our nerd prom.
Now it's
please.
Michelle Wolf. It's always a liberal comedian.
Always a liberal comedian. It should be. We asked you, maybe we should have a conservative comedian at one of these times. And we asked you for some comments.
Sorry.
Ed thinks it should be me.
No, Ed's the only person that thinks it should be me.
So we asked you who you think should host the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and your emails are pouring in with suggestions. This is from Tracy. Says Tim Allen would be awesome. He's from, of course, Home Improvement, but now he's on a new show that people love.
Yep, and we got an email from Nick. Roseanne Barr would be far better than any liberal comedian for the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
And email from Carol, the conservative, nice guys, Jeff Foxworthy or Bill Engvall should host the WHCA dinner because they're middle America. Imagine that.
Karen says, I think that Diamond and Silk should host the next year. I bet the president would be more than happy to attend.
That is actually a great suggestion.
The big major award this year, CNN for their Russia coverage. That's not, I'm actually being honest. That gives you a sense of what kind of award
I would like to see, though, what would happen if he did show up to a White House
I
Correspondents'
think
Dinner.
maybe after the midterms. 2019, I predict he'll be
Like
there.
maybe he'll go next year.
Yeah.
Just the interaction between him and the press, and boy, I can only imagine what would go on there.
We'll see.
All right. Well, I do want to bring you some other headlines that we are following closely this morning, starting with a serious one and a Fox News alert. 14 people have been killed in a horrific bus crash carrying a Canadian junior hockey team. While driving to the game, a semi colliding with the bus, carrying players between the ages of 16 and 21 along with their coaches. Another 14 people were injured, 3 of them critically. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau tweeting, quote, I cannot imagine what these parents are going through, and my heart goes out to everyone affected by this terrible tragedy. So heartbreaking. Also, the Justice Department now allowing House and Senate Intelligence Committees extraordinary access to view surveillance warrants granted against a former Trump campaign advisor. House Chairman Devin Nunes and other congressional Republicans have accused the DOJ and the FBI of using the FISA process by relying on the unverified anti-Trump dossier to obtain warrants to spy on Carter Page. Former House Oversight Committee Chairman Jason Chaffetz was on our show earlier and gave this reaction.
You asked the question, what is it that you think Congress should not see? And there's not a really good answer to that. My experience is most of this is redacted, not for classification purposes, but because it's embarrassing.
Well, the DOJ is now promising to turn over another 1,000 pages by Monday. All right, so we told you about this earlier. A New York Times recipe for a peanut butter and, yes, pickle sandwich is tearing readers apart and going viral. Many of our viewers weighing in on the unlikely pairing. A lot of you are actually fans of this sandwich. John writing us, PB and pickle sandwich, just ate one yesterday. Been eating them for over 60 years. Gary saying, I've been eating peanut butter and pickle sandwiches, both sweet and dill, pretty much since my dad introduced me to them in the 50s. Not only tasty, but a nice change of pace from PB and J. So we're going to have to try them out on our own, of course.
I've been
You
eating
see
it while
right
you were
here.
reading.
You see how they're sliced on there? You got the peanut butter, you got the pickles.
Whoever made these did a great job.
Yeah, I want them to make our sandwiches every day.
It's actually pretty tasty.
Is peanut butter bad with anything, though?
It's true.
Can you think of one ingredient that would be bad with peanut butter?
And just pickle makes
I would
everything
think
worse.
it would be
Pickle.
pickle, and it's actually
I
very
love
good.
peanut butter, but this is a little weird.
You don't like it?
But if you get the dill,
like
it's
it.
got a little bit of sweet to it, right? Mixed with the
I'm
salty.
okay with it. I'm not good with the wheat bread. I'm kind of a Wonder Bread guy.
Well,
You know?
And
I'm
now
wondering
we-
if that's muddying the
I
water.
figured that about you.
Now we have to read the prompter with peanut butter. That's
luck
a
with
challenge.
that.
All right, coming up next, Dan Bongino on the border battle. Up next.
It's growing on me.
And then, do you want to keep your personal information private on Facebook? Well, then you're going to have to pay up or try reading teleprompter with
Well
peanut
done,
butter in your
Pete.
mouth. The other job.
Welcome back. Well, the National Guard starting to deploy to the border from Arizona and Texas.
The order coming the same day at least one migrant was caught hopping our border in less than 2 minutes because there's not really a wall there.
So will critics continue to say he's inflating our nation's immigration problems? That is the question.
Here to weigh in is Dan Bongino, former Secret Service agent and the host of the Dan Bongino Show. So, Dan, critics saying this is overinflated, it's a hyped problem. What do you say?
That's total nonsense. You know what's not inflated? The gang problem resulting from gang members, some who are very violent. Again, not all people who come here obviously are criminals, but some are. And the ones who do come here who become members of gangs are extremely violent. You know, Pete, Ed, Abby, just ask some of the people in Long Island, New York, some of the people in California, how these gangs have just destroyed some of their communities. Another thing, this drug problem, the poisons being shipped across this border, that's a very real problem. That's not an inflated problem. And you know what? I'll throw another one at you. You know, the cost to American taxpayers out there who have to finance this nonsense and social programs being abused by people who came to this country illegally. Those are real problems. That's
Dan,
not inflated.
Why do it now, though? I mean, this is something the president campaigned on. He's been very forceful when it comes to immigration and laws that he wants to change in this country. Why now? Why not months ago?
You know, I think he's been dealing with an unprecedented amount of Democrat obstruction on the Hill. And you know, I get it. I know we have liberals that watch the network, and they'll say, oh, that's just an excuse. No, it's not. There is really an unprecedented level of obstruction. Abby, whether it's appointments at the bureaucratic level for the president's selections for positions in the law enforcement community, whether it's him trying to get his wall built, which is what he ran on. It was his signature issue. The Democrats have firmly and resolutely stood in his way and said, you know what, we're not going to do it because it sells well amongst our radical liberal base, standing in your face and saying no.
Dan, hang on a second. You say it's all Democratic obstructionism, but a couple months ago, Chuck Schumer put the funding for the border wall right there on the table with the president in the budget negotiations, and the president walked away. So the Democrats were not blocking it then. They put it on the table.
Yeah, but I could turn that around on you, Ed, and say the same thing. Fair enough question. But what about when President Trump offered DACA to an unprecedented number of people, basically more DACA recipients than even Obama did?
So Democrats should have taken that deal. But why didn't the president take the border wall? You want it so badly. Why didn't he take it?
Because there were too many trade-offs that would have involved basically incentivizing a flow of future illegal immigrants into the country in the future that would have, you know, basically incentivized, not stop the problem and incentivize people to come here in the future. But I thought the wall was going to stop the problem.
But not to mention the fact, no, but Barack Obama had both houses of the House and the Senate
so it's Obama's fault,
and could have pursued this if DACA was really a priority.
But the original, one of the original bills that would have stopped chain migration was definitely a good idea. Chain migration is a big portion of the problem. But I think the president gave them a more than fair deal with his DACA proposal for 1.8 million people, which was, I didn't agree with even, by the way, and the Democrats said no. So, again, you could turn it around on them.
Okay. All right, Dan, where does this go? Because you have National Guard now. Some are at the border. The president's asking for up to 4,000. What's the end game here?
Well, Abby, first there's got to be a recognition of the problem. You know, there's a lot of gaslighting going on by the left here. You know, this constant telling of a lie, telling it forcefully and repeatedly and isolating people from the truth. And the big lie is that illegal immigration should only be discussed in terms of the effect on the lawbreaker. You broke the law. Everybody worries about, oh, what's going to happen to the illegal. First is a recognition of the problem, that this is a real cost to the American taxpayer. And, by the way, it hurts people who come here legally the right way.
All right. Dan, we appreciate your insights. Always have a great weekend.
Always your energy. Dan, good to see you this morning. All right, coming up on the show, America's top doctor issuing the first national advisory in more than a decade. He's urging Americans to carry an opioid overdose antidote. That's a tongue twister.
Try to say that.
Dr. Jerome Adams joins us next to tell us how the decision was a personal.
Welcome back. Couple quick headlines for you as I have my morning coffee and you do as well. A federal judge upholding Massachusetts' 20-year ban on assault weapons, so-called assault weapons, and large-capacity magazines, dismissing a lawsuit challenging it. The judge's ruling identifying so-called assault weapons as military firearms, saying they do not violate the Second Amendment. He says lawmakers should decide on regulating weapons, not the courts. Makes sense to me. That's where laws are made, not behind closed doors. And a South Carolina congressman not backing down to gun critics, Republican Ralph Norman, proving they're only dangerous in the hands of criminals, reportedly placing a loaded .38 caliber handgun on a table during a meeting with constituents. He said he'll continue standing up for his rights at public meetings. Abby, down to you.
Well done, Pete. You didn't even trip. All right, thanks so much. In 2016, there were over 42,000 deaths due to opioids. That is more than any other year on record.
It's really stunning, and in response to the growing crisis this week, the Surgeon General issued the first ever national advisory in over a decade, but the first ever for the opioid crisis, urging that more Americans carry the opioid overdose antidote, naloxone. It's very important.
It is. Joining us this morning from D.C., Dr. Jerome Adams, the United States Surgeon General, who has a personal connection to this national crisis. Great to have you on, General. It's good to see you.
Thank you for having me here to talk about this important issue, Abby and Ed.
Well, first of all, I know this is a personal one to you, as it is for myself and so many other people in this country. It's such an important one. Tell us your story. Why is this important to you?
Well, my own little brother, Philip, sits in state prison right now because of the fact he stole $200 to support his addiction habit. He got a 10-year prison sentence, and it's going to cost the taxpayers much more money to incarcerate him than what it would have to have treated him. But I'll tell you, Abby, the one saving grace is that if he's in prison, at least he won't die. And we can't say that for far too many Americans right now.
That is a sad reality.
So talk to our viewers who might be skeptical of taxpayer money paying for treatment. You know, you make the case that we're going to spend more money incarcerating people, but so how do you believe, and how does the president believe we'll get more bang for the buck actually treating people?
Well, President Trump has made clear that one of his 3 priorities in regards to the opioid epidemic is saving lives. We have a person dying every 12.5 minutes from an opioid overdose, and what's shocking is that over half of these overdoses are occurring at home. That means we can't rely on 911. We can't rely on firefighters and policemen to save these lives. We need to arm Americans and folks who are around those individuals who are at risk to save those lives, and that's why I issued this advisory on naloxone.
So this opioid antidote kit that you say that people should walk around with, how would that work? Do people need to be trained to carry these around? How would this system be put in place?
Well, folks should go to surgeongeneral.gov for more information, or to their State Department of Health website. In 49 out of 50 states, there's a standing order so bystanders can carry naloxone, but you've got an injectable form that's like an EpiPen, Evzio, and you have a nasal form that is just, it's just that easy. I taught my niece Carly how to do it this morning. So anyone can save a life, anyone can be a hero, but you need to understand who's at risk, and everyone needs to understand they can carry naloxone.
So where do our viewers get those devices, those kits, and how much does it cost? I mean, is this $50? Is it $100? How expensive is it, and how do they go about doing it?
Well, again, in 49 out of 50 states, you can go into any pharmacy and get them by a standing order. If you pay cash for them, it's anywhere from $75 to $150. Many nonprofits and hospitals are giving them out for free. 95% of commercial insurers are providing naloxone for little or no copay. But President Trump has made it clear he doesn't want cost to be an impediment to saving lives. And saving lives is just the first part. And then it's connecting people to care. We don't just want to save lives and have them going through a revolving door. We want them to get connected to good treatment, good recovery. And again, go to my website, go to SAMHSA's website to find out what good treatment looks like.
All right, anyone who knows someone or has personally experienced losing someone they love to opioids, you have your own story. It's heartbreaking. It is so real, and we've got to find some answers and make some moves on this.
Thanks for all you do,
Surgeon
Doctor.
General, thank you so much.
Thank you, and remember, anyone, even the 2 of you, can save a life. Learn about naloxone.
Thank you so much.
Good message today. Thank you.
All right, coming up on the show, Nancy Pelosi says if Democrats win the midterms, they're going to repeal the GOP tax cuts. Take a listen.
It's not about chipping at this piece and that piece. It's about a comprehensive look what our tax policy should be for the future.
Well, not a single Democrat in the House or Senate voted for the tax cuts. So is that really the right message for them to take to the midterms? We're going to ask the former White House Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus. He's here live next.
I'm not saying there won't be a little pain, but the market's gone up 40%, 42%, so we might lose a little bit of it. But we're going to have a much stronger country when we're finished, and that's what I'm all about. We have to do things that other people wouldn't do. So we may take a hit, and you know what? Ultimately, we're going to be much stronger for it.
That was the president yesterday talking about proposed tariffs against China and a looming showdown on that front. Here to get a reaction to that is Reince Priebus, former chief of staff to President Trump and the former chairman of the RNC. Reince, thanks for joining us this morning. Really
Good
appreciate
morning.
it.
Hey, good morning.
Now, as you know, this is a topic the president has been talking about for a very long time. So it should come as no surprise to people that he's bringing it up now and building a showdown with China. Do you think he's right? The little pain up front is worth it for this showdown, and how far will he go to get his way?
Well, I think this is classic President Trump, right? I mean, you put the shots over the bow, you set up the negotiation table. Some people freak out about it, but then what you have is ultimately, I think, a solution that gets us in a better place. And if you look at what Larry Kudlow is saying and what Kevin Hassett is saying, who are the economic advisors, you'll see that they're saying exactly that we are setting up a negotiation. And I think we get to a better place. And I think the president then declares victory. And I think if you look at the past actions that have taken place, you look at North Korea in August last year, people freaked out because the president was being extremely aggressive. Tillerson was backing off, and lo and behold, we have an agreement. You look at Afghanistan, the president was talking about pulling out completely, people freaked out, ultimately a solution was had. Same thing with Syria, just happened last week. So I think if you look at the pattern, you'll see that the president, in most cases, is negotiating up front, sending shots over the bow, and then setting himself up for a solution. I think that's what you have here.
All right. Well, want to get your thoughts on this as well. The head of the EPA, Scott Pruitt, our own Ed Henry did a pretty intense interview with him just a few days ago. And the question is, what is the future for him? Because the president has said he likes the job that Scott Pruitt is doing at the EPA, but there are questions around some of his handling, some controversies over whether he is, in fact, a part of that swamp, taking advantage of first-class flights to private planes, you name it. What do you think should happen? Should he be fired?
No, I don't. I think that what he's got to do is somehow show the American public that he's got the EPA buckled down, you know, come to the table, show how things are going to be different, which I think he's starting to do. But you know, look, if you look at the agenda that he's put in place, the Clean Water executive order, you look at the energy, the changes that have been made in energy regulations, the coal industry coming back. I mean, he's done, you know, a huge chunk of the changes that have taken place that are making the economy hum again are in large part from President Trump's orders that Scott Pruitt is implementing. The other dichotomy here, too, is that, you know, Trump world loves Scott Pruitt. So you also have a huge base of the party that actually knows who the EPA director is, which isn't normally the case. I mean, if you asked me who the last 3 EPA directors were, I couldn't tell you.
It's a good point, but is that enough, though? Because you think about the swamp, that's what the president ran on, and policies aside, some of the decisions that the head of the EPA has made have been a perfect example of how the president describes the swamp. So he's in a tough position there, because you can be hypocritical saying, well, I want to get rid of the swamp, but he also has some good policies.
Well, I think people make mistakes, and mistakes don't put people in a swamp. I think what you have is, you know, deficits that are out of control, parties that can't seem to come together and get things done. So look, I hear you. I think it's a tough issue for people to talk about, but I think if you look at the preponderance of the evidence, I think Scott Pruitt is doing a great job. And I think more importantly, we have a 2018 midterm coming up. And I look at what's happened in Wisconsin this past week and where we're going, and it's an issue that I think needs to be focused on.
The left also hates Scott Pruitt because he's been effective on so many things that he wants to do. And there's no doubt about it. But you mentioned the 2018 midterms. One of the big things Republicans want to run on are tax cuts, drawing a contrast to Democrats, none of which voted for the tax bill. Well, Nancy Pelosi, who would like to be Speaker again, was asked what Democrats would do about the tax bill recently. This is what she had to say.
We'll sit down at the table and say, what would be a tax bill that creates growth, that creates good-paying jobs as it reduces the deficit. It's not about chipping at this piece and that piece. It's about a comprehensive look what our tax policy should be for the future.
So are they going to run against this tax cut?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to, and it's what the party has to be very careful of, because as much as we all know that it's one of the biggest tax cuts in the history of our country and does really well for people in the middle and people at the bottom, which is what the president ran on, they're going to try to get ahead of the Republicans on this, and they're going to label it as always, this is a tax cut for the extremely wealthy. You were left behind. It's not what the president promised. That's what they're going to deliver. And I was talking about this for a second ago. If you look at what happened in Wisconsin last week and what it means for the future, you know, that was people should look at that election. That was a base election. There was no President Trump on the ballot. There was no Scott Walker. And there's huge Dem turnout, especially in college towns. And that ribbon in the middle, this sort of Trump, Walker, Pete, you know, Jesse Ventura ribbon in the upper Midwest, that piece has to be motivated. And if it's not motivated, you can't win in places like Wisconsin.
And to your point, Ryan, in fact, Scott Walker weighed in after that liberal judge got a seat on the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. Quote, tonight's results show me we're at risk of a blue wave in Wisconsin. Big government special interests flooded Wisconsin with distorted facts and misinformation. Next, they'll target me and work to undo our bold reforms. You were there. You were in the room when the president was winning on election night because of states like Wisconsin. What does the current chief of staff need to do to make sure the party is speaking directly to those voters?
Well, for one thing, you have to get ahead of Nancy Pelosi on the tax cuts and show that it works for people in the middle. But secondly, the party, and I think they're doing this, but I would just triple down on it, you have to invest very, very heavily in absentee ballot early vote operations, meaning checking off the list every 70, 80, 90%er for a Republican. You have to put massive field organization on the ground, as much as you can possibly afford, without question. Then I think the party also has to get on campuses again. And I know that people think it's a lost cause. It's not. You have to stop the bleeding, campus coordinators, massive field organization, and there shouldn't be, you know, any money left on the table. And then I would also say, if you've got bad candidates in places and you can replace them, dump them. And recruit better candidates, because one thing the Democrats have done is they've put they've fielded pretty good candidates, and I think the Republicans have too, and I think they've done a great job. But if there's any bleeding anywhere, they need to be replaced.
Last question. Yesterday, the Associated Press had a story that the current chief of staff, John Kelly, is in a tough spot where the president seems to not be listening to a lot of his advice and sort of going his own way. You're in a unique position, the first chief of staff, who was caught in the middle of some of that. What's your advice to John Kelly? What's your situation? What's your assessment of how it's playing out right now with the president?
Well, the president likes to be his own person. I mean, if you look at The Art of the Deal, one of the most telling paragraphs is when he said, I like to keep things loose. I don't want to be overbooked. I like to go to the office and see what develops. That's the president's management style. So I think that actually, personally, I think a lot of it's overblown. I think that the general's doing a great job. I hope he stays for, you know, 3 more years or whatever it takes. But look, I think you have to adapt, and I think he is adapting to the president's style. And the president wants to call the shots, and he also wants people to know that he's calling the shots. And if something gets in between that, it becomes a problem.
Do you feel good about his political acumen as we go into the midterm here?
I do. I do. I mean, obviously, you look at the race in Pennsylvania and everyone's overanalyzing it. You know, the president wasn't on the ballot. If the president was on the ballot, he probably would have won that race. But the problem is that you have the enthusiasm, even on that question, diminished. And so what is the party going to do to make up for the fact that when a party's in power, the other side comes into play? And do you have enough horsepower on the ground and the kind of candidates that can overcome the fact that you're facing that headwind? And there's no doubt about it. It is a headwind, and the calculation is, what do you need to do to defeat it and survive it?
Yeah, speaking of acclimating, how's life been post-White House for you?
It's pretty good. I hope you can tell I'm pretty relaxed and having a good time. But no, it's great. But obviously, always willing to be supportive of our team. But I look forward to at least doing well in the midterms. I think it can happen, but I think we're going to have to work pretty hard.
We look forward to having you back. Ryan Priebus, thanks for coming in.
Good to see you.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Now, do you want to keep your personal information private on Facebook? Well, then they say you're going to have to pay for it.
Good. And Hollywood back at it again, slamming President Trump. A movie director even tweeting for him to die. When's that going to end? This is just one of the celebrity antics of the week. We've got more for you. Of course, there's more. Coming up just ahead.
All right, well, everyone is talking about Facebook right now, and Mark Zuckerberg is going to go in front of Congress in just a few days.
Yeah, testify this week, 2 days of hearings where we expect he'll be on the griddle, and the question is going to be, are they really cleaning up their act? Here's Sheryl Sandberg on the Today Show yesterday. She also talked to her own Dana Perino. Here's what she said on the Today Show about all this.
Could you come up with a tool that said, I do not want Facebook to use my personal profile data to target me for advertising? Would you have an opt-out button? Please don't use my profile data for advertising.
We have different forms of opt-out. We don't have an opt-out at the highest level. That would be a paid product.
See that she was struggling.
Which, in other words, if you want your information private and you're on Facebook, you basically have to pay for that.
Pay a premium.
That's another way of saying
And I think one of the questions is going to be that her tour yesterday with Dana and others appeared to me to be more of a PR crisis thing. Mark Zuckerberg's just got to take all that away. Take out the lawyers, the PR people,
just
tell the truth, be real, be authentic, which is what Facebook was supposed to be. Transparency, authenticity. Show us that instead of this corporate speak.
Well, no, and the challenge is their business model is based on private information and leveraging advertisers' ability to target the right people. So I talked to Kurt the Cyber Guy about this yesterday and did some small tweaks on my Facebook page to minimize exposure.
Can you share those?
No, they're on his Kurt the Cyber Guy website. I mean, there's small things you can do. But to her point, there's no big button you can just say, I want to opt out of everything. Why would Facebook do that? That would undermine their entire business model. 80% of people would be like, sure, I'll opt out, and now they don't have data anymore. That's why they're saying it would be a paid product, because they would have to find revenue as well. So you can understand business-wise, they're trying to maintain their competitive edge, but people are like, hey, what are you doing with my data?
And they have gone as far as they possibly could before this got public, right? Why didn't they make these decisions well before now?
I also, as a conservative, I want to know what they're doing with their algorithms, because a lot of conservative websites have been, really, their business models have been undermined by changes from Facebook. Not a lot of trust there. So the left and the right questions of Facebook. Good luck, Mark Zuckerberg.
It's going to be tough.
Have fun. All right. And Hollywood back at it again, slamming President Trump, a movie director, even tweeting for him to die. That's just one of the many celebrity antics of the week. More on that and the rest of Hollywood's unhinged, as we call them, again, antics, next.
And remember when Ed, when Ed beat Pete at basketball? Yeah, we play this every day on the show. He is now getting a chance at redemption with our own mini golf masters out on the plaza. This is something I promise you not want to miss. My money's on Pete.
We're going to have a leaders board.
Your money's been on me before, Abby. It's a rough bet.
Well, no shock, Hollywood back at it again this week, using their platform to slam the president and his supporters as well.
Here to round up the worst celebrity antics of the week, comedian, writer, and producer of the show, Kevin Can Wait, Michael Loftus. Michael, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Appreciate your time.
It's fun, man.
It is. Unfortunately, there's always too much to talk about when it comes to Hollywood. Rob Reiner had some thoughts about Roseanne this week. Let's play what he had to say and get your response.
You have the star of the show essentially outside the show trumpeting all of the things that Donald Trump stands for. When you take the main character and that person is a personification of Trump's point of view, then that puts that idea forward.
So how dare Roseanne do that?
Yeah, the unmitigated gall of her being a pro-Trump person, and the show was huge. It was huge, and it's almost like an exact model of the Electoral College. The show didn't do well in New York or in L.A., but the rest of the country was like, finally, someone who's actually entertaining and thinks like I do. I love it. I just want to roam around in Rob Reiner's head. Remember the movie Men in Black where there's that little alien that sat in the robot?
Yeah, you're right.
I want to get in Rob Reiner's head and just drive around and see what he sees. It's so bleak. His outlook is so bleak, like there's buildings on fire and Trump's on top of the Empire State Building knocking planes out of the sky. Lighten up, meathead. It's all going to be okay.
Well, there's this director, Joss Whedon, who tweeted Wednesday that he wants President Donald Trump to die. That's literally what he said. Quote, Donald Trump is killing this country. Some of it quickly, some slowly, but he spoils and destroys everything. He emboldens monsters, wielding guns, governmental power, just smug doublespeak, or Russia. He's just throwing things out here. My hate and sadness are exhausting. Die, Don. Just quietly die. Now, I understand his account was suspended, thankfully. Then he comes back and says, I was put in Twitter suspension, but luckily there was also a jock, a weird girl, a socialite, and a rebel, and it turns out we're all the same or something. Anyway, they all hooked up, and I had to write this tweet, so I'm not sure. Trump's still killing the country, though. LOL. So he's still laughing about the fact that he said the president should die.
Yeah, I said the president should die, but I was just joking. Like, that's like a never come back to Twitter offense, and so dramatic. So dramatic. It's almost like he ripped a page out of the script for Lord of the Rings. You know, and Donald Trump is killing the country. Sauron has risen. It's like, dude, lighten up. Everyone else is having a great time. You drive around the rest of the country. We need to pick Joss Whedon up and drop him off in Iowa. Just knock him out and have him wake up in Dubuque where people are happy and they're working. And you're like, hey, Josh, because your name is Josh. There's not two S's, there's an H in there. Well, these are factories, those are jobs, and these are happy people.
Well, and where are all the monsters wielding guns, as he says?
Yeah, it's so dire. Listen, it's still dark outside here in Hollywood, and I have to scramble home before the light comes out because I'm like the only conservative here. But it's so dire. You go to these big Hollywood parties and these self-important celebrities, they just, it's Russia, and it's bad, and he's killing the country, and they have no context. No facts behind it. It's just a feeling. It's just a feeling. It's
Michael
bad.
Loftus, get home safe before the light comes out. Thanks for coming in.
Before you melt. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. All right, well, that was entertaining. Enjoyed that. Still ahead, what happened during...
Like he ripped a page out of the script for Lord of the Rings. You know, and Donald Trump is killing the country. Sauron has risen. It's like, dude, lighten up. Everyone else is having a great time. You drive around the rest of the country. We need to pick Joss Whedon up and drop him off in Iowa. Just knock him out and have him wake up in Dubuque where people are happy and they're working. And you're like, hey, Josh, because your name is Josh. There's not two S's, there's an H in there. Well, these are factories, those are jobs, and these are happy people.
Well, and where are all the monsters wielding guns, as he says?
Yeah, it's so dire. Listen, it's still dark outside here in Hollywood, and I have to scramble home before the light comes out because I'm like the only conservative here. But it's so dire. You go to these big Hollywood parties and these self-important celebrities, they just, it's Russia, and it's bad, and he's killing the country, and they have no context. No facts behind it. It's just a feeling. It's just a feeling. It's
Michael
bad.
Loftus, get home safe before the light comes out. Thanks for coming in.
Before you melt. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. All right, well, that was entertaining. Enjoyed that. Still ahead, what happened during that infamous tarmac meeting between former President Bill Clinton and former Attorney General Loretta Lynch? We might finally get an answer.